Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
Speaking of walls crashing down, the wall of separation between church and state is crashing down, or at least some people want that wall to come crashing down, while other people want to build another wall. Donald Trump wants to build a wall on the Mexican border. Scott Walker wants to build one on the Canadian border. But, you know, let's talk about this wall of separation between church and state for a moment, because it's really been at the forefront of a news story for the last couple of weeks, although people have not talked about separation of church and state in this particular story. The story that I'm talking about is in regards to one Kim Davis. Kim Davis, you may recall, is the elected county clerk in Rowan County, Kentucky. Kim Davis was elected in November of last year, and I find this surprising, and I mention it only because a lot of Republicans have come out in support of her. Kim Davis is a Democrat. Kim Davis has also been married 4 times to 3 men. The father of her children that she got pregnant with during her first marriage was actually her 3rd husband. And I've heard that she has kids with all 3 husbands, but I don't really know. I've not investigated. But the current husband, husband number 4, is also husband number 2. So you got me there. She's been married 4 times to 3 men. She's been divorced 3 times. But she claims that her religious beliefs prevent her from issuing a marriage license to a same-sex couple. And she stopped issuing any marriage license at all in June after the U.S. Supreme Court declared that, based on the U.S. Constitution's Equal Protection Clause, that states cannot prevent 2 people from getting married as long as those 2 people are consenting adults. So I view Miss Davis in the same way that I, in hindsight, view a lot of the county clerks and probate judges in 1969, 1970, and up until like 1972, when the U.S. Supreme Court finally settled, no, you cannot prevent an interracial couple from getting married. The initial case, the Loving v. Virginia case, came out in, I think, 68 or 69. And then there were numerous cases after that because you had clerks and probate judges refusing to issue these marriage licenses, refusing to perform these ceremonies, and it took several years. And now people look back and think, wow, I can't believe anybody ever stopped somebody from marrying somebody that was not the same ethnicity as them. And now people look at this, and there's a major comparison, because the people that were standing up back in the late 60s and early 70s were saying the same thing that Kim Davis is now. Well, my religion says, okay, that's fine. That is absolutely fine. Your religion can say whatever you want it to say. You can be as much of a hypocrite as you want to be. However, you do not have the right to enforce your religious beliefs upon others through your government position. Do I think that Kim Davis should be sitting in jail right now? Absolutely not. Do I think that Kim Davis is in contempt of court? Absolutely. Do I think that Kim Davis should be eventually removed from office? Absolutely. However, because of the way the rules are in Kentucky, she can only be removed if the Attorney General winds up getting a conviction of certain offenses against her, and then she's able to be removed, or the legislature can vote to remove her. The Kentucky governor says it's too expensive to call a special session of the legislature just to remove this woman from office. So the legislature will wait until they convene in January before determining whether or not they will take action to remove Kim Davis as the county clerk in Rowan County, Kentucky. So, no, I don't think she should be in jail. I also think that she should be punished for not doing her job. And part of her job is to issue marriage licenses to people. And some people are saying, well, people that want to get married, they can just drive to another county. And true, they could drive the 5 to 10 miles to another county from wherever they live in Rowan County, but they should not have to do that. And I'm reminded whenever somebody says, like, well, they can just go to wherever. It's the same sort of argument that's being made in Texas right now, where all but I think like 4 or 5 abortion facilities have been shut down. And the claim is, well, if people want an abortion, they can just drive to another state. Like, people should not have to drive to another jurisdiction in order to exercise whatever right they want. And yes, I realize that getting a license to get married is not exercising a right. However, there are people that don't really want to wind up facing whatever legal consequences for not getting the marriage license. And Kentucky state law requires 2 people that are married to have a license in order for the state to recognize their marriage, which means that if 2 people, same sex or opposite sex, doesn't matter, if they're living together, cohabitating, and they're living as, you know, a spouse and a spouse, husband and wife, husband and husband, whatever, if they're, you know, living together in that marriage sort of act, but they don't have the piece of paper, then there are certain things that they are not allowed to do. Hospitals will not allow the life partner to make medical decisions absent some document saying, this is my spouse. There are things involving taxes that they are not able to wind up taking advantage of if they do not have this piece of paper saying this person is my spouse. So there are legal reasons why someone would want that license, even though I agree it's a completely horrible idea. I don't think there should be a government license in the first place, but in the reality that we live in, there is a license, and it's this woman's job to issue said license. It is not her job to determine who gets to have the license. It is not her job to determine what is and is not a moral relationship. And, you know, I bring this up a lot whenever people talk about, you know, their Christian beliefs and therefore we need to prevent gay people from getting married. Well, you know, it's just a couple verses away in Leviticus where it talks about homosexuality, where it talks about eating shellfish is a sin, where it talks about not eating pork. It talks about people with tattoos that's sinful. So is this woman preventing people with tattoos from getting married? Is she preventing or refusing to allow people that eat shellfish? She should not be enforcing her views on others. End of story. And how's that relate to free speech? I'll tell you in just a moment.
You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and Numery supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $3 per month or any amount of Bitcoin per month, thanks to the recurring payment options provided by Coinbase. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. Coinbase is a simple and secure online Bitcoin wallet for sending, receiving, and storing Bitcoin. Coinbase also allows you to buy and sell Bitcoin using a bank account or use their tools to accept Bitcoin as a merchant. Coinbase has more than 1 million consumer wallets and is trusted by over 25,000 merchants, including Overstock.com, Khan Academy, Reddit, and of course, FPP. Get started at coinbase.fppradio.com. In 2115 New England, there are no borders, no states, and no regulations, yet never has a more peaceful and prosperous place existed. But Mr. Drake's security company has seen better days. Faced with the prospect of waning power, Mr. Drake intends to replace the anarchy of New England with a government. But at what cost? And can anyone stop him? Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
So what in the world does this woman in Kentucky have to do with free speech? Other than some people saying that she's exercising it and therefore shouldn't be punished because, like government officials don't have to actually follow government diktats. Well, free speech and the right to your religious beliefs are both rights that are recognized in the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. And there are some people saying that both things are under attack, and I would agree partially. I would say that free speech in some ways is under attack. And, well, the U.S. Supreme Court recently, it was about a week ago, and I'm surprised I've not gotten to this story beforehand, but the U.S. Supreme Court recently wound up saying that, no, you don't have free speech on the front porch of the U.S. Supreme Court. The story here comes from the Washington Post. The Supreme Court is designated as the ultimate protector of constitutional rights, but the guarantee of protest and free speech ends on the steps to the plaza in front of the court's grand marble temple that, according to a unanimous federal appeals court panel on Friday, so 1 week ago, demonstrators are allowed on the sidewalk in front of the court, but not any closer to the famous portico, promising equal justice under the law. 3 judges of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia made that decision. The fight over whether protesters get to protest has been going for years. The appeals court judges upheld a 1949 law that forbids demonstrations on the grounds of the High Court, on the premise that protest at the court's doorstep might lead to the perception that the justices are swayed by vox populi rather than the diktats of the law. The U.S. District Circuit, or rather U.S. Circuit Judge Sri Srinivasan said allowing demonstrations directed at the court on the court's on-front terrace would tend to yield the opposite impression, that of a court engaged with and potentially vulnerable to outside entries by the public, or rather entreaties by the public. The judge argued often before the court as a lawyer and is sometimes mentioned as a future Supreme Court justice. On days when controversial cases are argued and decided, the 50-foot wide sidewalks surrounding the court are filled with chanting, flag-waving, bullhorn-toting protesters of all stripes. The Supreme Court itself in 1983 ruled that these sidewalks on 1st Street Northeast, just across from the Capitol, are open for protest. But demonstrators are not allowed any closer. The court, in its 1983 decision, did not address the protest restrictions on the court's ground, which include the 252 by 98-foot oval marble plaza with its fountains, benches, flagpoles, and steps leading to the court's iconic 6-ton bronze doors. Critics have found the no-speech zone around the Supreme Court ironic, if not hypocritical. The current court considers itself a fierce protector of political speech, knocking down restrictions on corporate spending on elections. And that's one example that they give here. The justices also struck down a Massachusetts law that limited speech around abortion clinics. And they also recently threw out a sign ordinance out of Gilbert, Arizona, that one of the dissenting judges wrote could be construed in such a way as to invalidate every sign ordinance that currently exists in the United States of America. And you know what? I would love to see every sign ordinance that exists in the U.S. be thrown out, because when you start restricting people's signs, then there's problems with that, because you can claim, well, we're just preventing people from X, and then X can be construed to be Y, Z, A, B, C, D, alpha, beta, gamma, omicron, and epsilon, but then you're only allowed to do L, N, and P. And yes, I know I'm just throwing out a bunch of letters. Some of those were from the Greek alphabet, but you get the point that I'm making. So, for instance, in Gilbert, Arizona, and I had talked about this case previously, there was a statute that said that if a sign is for an event, then the sign can only be so big by so big, and it can only be up for 12 hours before the event, and it must be removed at least or not more than 2 hours after the event. But if it's a sign that's advertising something or is some other kind of sign not advertising an event, then it can be like 4 times bigger, and there's no restrictions on when, where, and how it can be placed. In Keene, which is the town where I live, the sign ordinance goes so far as to regulate flags, to where a business can wave an American flag, or they can wave a flag that says open, or they can wave the state flag, but they can't wave other flags without getting a sign variant, like a variance to the sign ordinance. So, now we're regulating flags. And next they're going to be saying, well, anybody that is protesting, you can do this, this, or this, and we don't care what the position you're taking. This is a viewpoint neutral thing, and that's one of the things that the Supreme Court has mentioned in the past, is that restrictions have to be time, place, and manner. There's got to be a time, place, and manner, and it's got to be viewpoint neutral. So you can't say you're not allowed to protest abortion, but you are allowed to protest war. You can just say, like, you're not allowed to protest during this time, in this place, and in this manner. So it's very sort of broad the way the U.S. Supreme Court is telling jurisdictions they can't protest or eliminate protest or set up free speech zones, but yet the U.S. Supreme Court is itself a free speech zone. In 2010, the article continues, because of security concerns, the court said the public was no longer allowed to enter through the massive front doors. Visitors must go through security checkpoints on the ground floor, although they may exit via the massive front doors that, again, 6 tons of bronze. You can walk out the door, you just can't walk in the door. The 1949 federal statute makes it unlawful to parade, stand, or move in processions or assemblages in the Supreme Court building or grounds, or to display in the building and grounds a flag, banner, or device designed or adapted to bring into public notice a party, organization, or movement. In 2013, U.S. District Judge Darryl Howell struck down the restriction, writing partially in his 68-page opinion, "It cannot possibly be consistent with the First Amendment for the government to so broadly prohibit expression in virtually any form in front of a courthouse, even the Supreme Court." Within days, the U.S. Supreme Court instituted its own rule that essentially kept the restrictions in place, and the legal fight has continued. Howell was considering a challenge brought by Harold Hodge of Southern Maryland, who was arrested in January 2011 for standing on the plaza wearing a sign that said the U.S. government allows police to illegally murder and brutalize African Americans and Hispanic people.
Bitcoin Not Bombs is a launching pad for nonprofits and social entrepreneurs into the financial freedom of the Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin Not Bombs offers premium publicity campaigns designed to facilitate an organization's adoption of Bitcoin as a payment system. Bitcoin Not Bombs is fully committed to being the hub of the nonprofit sector of the Bitcoin economy, maximizing the potential cross-promotion of all our clients and commercial partners. To learn more, visit bitcoinnotbombs.com. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, ExpressCoin, and Amazon, at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com. The Doublespeak Dictionary by Leslie Starr O'Hara satirizes the marked difference between the ideal of we the people and the reality of we the elite, while offering an insightful glimpse into the clockworks of the totalitarian mind. Ever irreverent but never irrelevant, the Doublespeak Dictionary serves as a subversive and humorous but timely reminder that the emperor has no clothes. The Doublespeak Dictionary is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry. Online at fppradio.com.
Before I continue telling you about the man that was arrested in 2011, Harold Hodge, I want to make sure that I tell you about Liberty.me. Liberty.me, it's more than just a social networking website. There's a publishing aspect to it, so you can have your old WordPress blog connected to your social network there on Liberty.me. There are forums, there are chat rooms, there are free ebooks, there's a lot of audio that you can download, and so much more. And one thing that you will not find at Liberty.me is internet trolls. Why are there no internet trolls at Liberty.me? Well, that's because Liberty.me is a paid site. It is a paid service. Internet trolls don't want to have to pay to be an internet troll. That's one of the wonderful things about Liberty.me. So check it out. Use referral code FPP Radio. Save 10% on your registration there at Liberty.me. Referral code FPP Radio. The judge in the U.S. District Court, or the U.S. District Court, Darryl Howell, in 2013, was considering a challenge brought by Harold Hodge of Maryland, who was arrested for wearing a 3-foot by 2-foot sign that said, "The U.S. government allows police to illegally murder and brutalize African Americans and Hispanic people." He was arrested for that in 2011. Hodge was represented by the Rutherford Institute, which is a nonprofit civil liberties group that denounced the ruling on Friday. Institute President John W. Whitehead said, "If citizens cannot stand out in the open and voice their disapproval of their government, its representatives, and its policies without fearing prosecution, then the First Amendment is little more than window dressing on a store window, pretty to look at, but serving little real purpose." Through a series of carefully crafted legislative steps and politically expedient court rulings, government officials have managed to disembowel their fundamental freedom. But Srinivasan said the court is different from Congress, where people have a right to protest for political action. The plaza, he says, is designed as an extension of the court, and restrictions on protests there need only be reasonable and viewpoint neutral. There is no suggestion that the law is discriminatory, saying demonstrations, this from the judge, demonstrations supporting the court's decision and demonstrations opposing them are equally forbidden in the plaza. He adds, unless demonstrations are to be freely allowed inside the Supreme Court itself, a line must be drawn somewhere along the route from the street to the court's front entrance. Among the options, it is fully reasonable that the line be fixed at the point one leaves the concrete public sidewalk and enters the marble steps to the court's plaza. And I cannot disagree more. And the reason I say that I cannot disagree more is because the U.S. Supreme Court is not private property. The U.S. Supreme Court is public property, meaning that it is owned by a government entity. And as public property, the line, if there is to be a line, the line should be at the front door. You want to protest 3 inches away from the front door? Go for it. But be aware that you might be hit by the door as it gets open. But you want to protest right by the front door? Go for it. Just don't take the protest inside. I can understand a restriction of no protest inside the court. I cannot understand no protest on this 292 foot by, 50-something foot area that is outside. 252 foot by 98 foot marble plaza that has benches, fountains, and flagpoles leading up to the front steps. I cannot understand why someone cannot stand there and protest. Because that, Mr. Judge Man, is totally different than protesting in the courtroom itself. This Judge Srinivasan was joined by Circuit Judge Karen LeCraft Henderson and Senior Circuit Judge Stephen F. Williams. The plaza is likely to remain a place for only tourist wedding cameras and journalists interviewing lawyers and their clients after oral arguments and decisions. Cameras, of course, are not allowed in the court. So here we have another hypocrisy, another double standard. You can have a camera on the plaza, but you can't have a camera inside the courtroom. But here, just a couple lines beforehand, he says, unless demonstrators are allowed to freely be allowed inside the Supreme Court itself, a line must be drawn. Well, draw the line for protesters at the same line you have for cameras. But again, that makes too much sense. And I have to wonder if the Supreme Court has the same ridiculous rule that the Capitol Hill has, to where you can have a camera on a monopod, but you can't have a camera on a tripod. And I only know about this because in 2008, I was going to record something on the steps of the Capitol, set up my tripod. Security came over and said, "You're not allowed to have a tripod." I said, "What if I use only one leg?" And they said, "Yeah, that's fine. That's not a tripod." I'm not joking. I wish I were joking about that. But I am not joking. So one leg, I wound up pulling one leg down using the tripod as a monopod, because then, if more than one's touching, then that's not allowed. But one leg, okay. Monopod, okay. Tripod, not. I wonder if the Supreme Court has that same sort of stupid rule. Probably not. Whitehead noted in his statement, Whitehead, of course, being the president of the Rutherford Institute, which was defending or plaintiffizing. They were on behalf of the guy that got arrested in 2011. Whitehead noted in his statement that the decision could be appealed, and that his organization is also challenging the restriction that the Supreme Court implemented after Howell's ruling. But there was little expectation of success. Whitehead said, ironically, it will be the justices of the Supreme Court who will eventually be asked to decide the constitutionality of their own statute in this case, yet they have already made their views on the subject quite clear. Now, I wonder if he would be able to get all 9 judges of the U.S. Supreme Court to recuse themselves in this hearing. What would happen? And yes, I know the likelihood of all 9 judges recusing themselves because they wrote a policy that is nearly identical to the statute that is being challenged. I just think it would be very interesting to see what would happen. There's nobody that can hear the case. So what happens? Is it an automatic win for the free speech to where you can then wind up protesting on the plaza? You can step foot onto the plaza holding your sign, not realizing that you stepped foot onto the plaza because it just runs right into the sidewalk. If you were not if by some chance you were there and you did not realize that you stepped off of the sidewalk onto the plaza, you could be arrested based on the wording of the thing right now. And, well, the court would wind up upholding it because, well, we've already decreed that you've got to draw the line somewhere. So we're drawing the line at you don't have free speech. Hey, don't forget, every Wednesday's the Ask Me Anything. Send those questions to AMA at FPPradio.com.